Hey, what's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast presented to you by Texas Pete. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, let's get a check-in from you. You are back. You are you're in better shape now than you were on Sunday morning post Tiger Bowl. How are we feeling on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm feeling amazing. And like we were just offlining about this. It's like I wish I could tell you I just like went out and like, went to Tigerland, just had a great time. It's like I was trying to get prepped and I set everything up and then I just like hit like we were on the pod and I was like, hi. And I was like, oh great, I sound like Death or Ozzy Osbourne. And I was like, and we just like, kind of looked at each other. We're like, well, this one's not happening. But yeah, it was a great time. I finally got to get to Krista's tailgate, which was awesome. It was my favorite. I've ran into her at every LSU event I've been to since I have started like being on the pod. And because the first time that I ran into her, she literally recognized my laugh from across the bar. It was like, there he is. And so I've ran into her, but I haven't gone to her tailgate. Oh my gosh, man. I felt like I was in the Walmart Alum Hall of Fame. I like rolled up. It was me and my boys. They are like in like the best spot. Like it was in the shadow of the Tiger Stadium side. Like it was literally, I could have hit the stadium with a football if I had a couple more brewskis. And like, it was so insane. Like it was her husband who's like Canadian and all of their boys. It was just a very cool environment. They had a tiger statue on top of an RV. So my game day experience was awesome. I had to, I sat in the Auburn section to keep it affordable for the boys. So we got pretty cheap tickets. I was just surrounded by Auburn fans having a good old time. I bought, this is just a high point in my life for my weekend. One of my buddies, like we were going to our seat. He goes, hey, did you just see that? I was like, what? He's like, an Auburn fan just pointed at you and goes, oh, there's that MF. And I was like, that's me.
Look, sometimes you got to just cross enemy lines. You have to do what you need to do for the sake of the group, and you were willing to do that. And by the way, I said on Sunday, Will had himself a Louisiana Saturday night. What I meant by that was simply he was in Death Valley on a Saturday night watching his team play. Will actually is so like people don't know this, a little peel behind the onion here. Like Will and I will text all the time about like, like, oh, I'm going to be here. Like, I'm not going to be able to like watch this specific game at this specific time or something, but I'll make sure I catch up. And like Will's dedication to his craft, trust me when I say this, like is second to none. I mean, Will is so dialed into all this stuff. So when I got on the pod and I said that, yeah, it's going to be a solo episode because Will had a Louisiana Saturday night. No, Will was not at Fred's. Will behaved himself very, very well and was up to date on everything. But like, I don't know how you have a voice after that, because even when I went, and I've only been to Death Valley once and I need to make a return trip. But when I was there for the Tiger Bowl in 2019 and we recorded the next morning, and I'm a neutral fan. Like I'm, obviously like I'm in thick of it with LSU people. I even remember thinking the next day, like, man, it's going to be tough to be able to save my voice for this. And I was as a non-fan. So you're excused. You're good. Glad you were able to enjoy yourself with the boys Saturday night in Death Valley. That's a happy place. So I'm glad you got to do that.
It's I always say like concerts and Tiger Stadium is like where I totally feel peace. Like it's like my brain is always at 80 or 90% happiness or whatever. Maybe sometimes it's 20. Sometimes you have bad days, but on a great day I'm at 80 or 90. And if I'm in those places, it's like the air is like lighter. It's just it's so fun. So I like to do that whenever I could. And yeah, it's gonna be, like I said, my last time in Tiger Stadium on the old SEC format. So I'll remember that forever.
There we go. Yes. Yeah. Crazy to think about the new matchups that'll be coming there and across a bunch of SEC stadiums. We have a great show lined up. We have a light slate in week 8, but plenty of intriguing storylines that we're going to dig into. Alyssa Lang is also going to join us, and then we're going to close with Lad of the Week. But first, talked briefly about this Sunday. We have more word about this now, obviously, as we sit here and record on Wednesday afternoon. Brock Bowers, the injury news. I wanted to be able to dig into this for a few minutes. So, Will, on Sunday night, I got a text that made the Sunday scaries set in a pretty significant way. As a Brock Bowers fan through and through, who has enjoyed watching him play football for the last 2.5 years, as much as anybody probably in the entire sport, my stomach kind of dropped when I was told, hey, Brock is going to Birmingham. He's going to get the Tua tightrope surgery. And that basically meant, yeah, he's going to be missing multiple games. Even for a non-human guy like Brock Bowers, the timetable for his return would be a bit touch and go. If you've seen kind of the varying important people who have weighed in on this, like Pete Thamel reported 4 to 6 weeks. Brett McMurphy is like, He's going to be sidelined for the remainder of the season, likely sidelined for the remainder of the season. I don't know that we can use Tua's injury timeline as the same for Bowers because obviously they play a different position. Tua didn't miss a game because they had the 4-week break between the SEC championship, between the playoff semifinal, and even Lawson Lucky, who is the freshman tight end star of the offseason for Georgia, that a lot of people are excited to see in a bigger role. He had the exact same injury as Brock Bowers in mid-August, and he just returned to the lineup in week 6 against Kentucky. So I don't know that this whole thing is going to be as obvious as we think it is. I would just say it's going to be week to week. I don't know if it's going to be 7 weeks. I don't know if it's going to be the rest of the regular season. Who knows? We'll have to kind of wait this thing out.
I'm going to say most likely outcome. I tweeted this to Marler. We were talking about it yesterday. It's like Brock Bowers is sitting in some type of a healing chamber like Mewtwo or Goku. And then he just like punches it. It breaks. He walks out for the SEC championship game, fully healthy, angry for like 230 and 2 tutties. I think if I had to put my money on that, I feel like he's an injury timeline beater. But we'll see. I mean, I thought he was out for the season. That was the thing. And then the timeline, it was one of those where the timeline started to get pushed back or like up and up and up. And it feels like it feels more likely that we haven't seen the last of him this season than it did initially. Does that make sense?
Just based on who Bowers has been in his career, I would be stunned if this were a situation a la Nick Bosa, a la Jackson Smith
he's
and
not
Jigba.
Opting out.
Yeah. And look, like I'm not doubting what those guys did or anything like that, but yeah, you bring up a good point. Seeing Brock Bowers sideline and then have to come back, and the anger that he will play with if and when he does return will be a sight to see. There are no guarantees, in my opinion, that Oscar Delp is going to be 75% of what Brock Bowers was. As decorated as Delp was, number 1 tight end recruit in the 2022 class. We are talking about a guy that I've said before, and I'll say again, is the best tight end in the history of college football. And the entire offense is built around him. It really is. Delp is nowhere near Bowers is as a run blocker, and expecting a true freshman tight end like Lucky, who we expect to be playing a lot more reps, expecting him to step in and block at that level is very unrealistic based on what we've seen from him so far. And based on the fact that this guy was a kick returner in high school. He's not somebody that just slots into the SEC trenches. He played tight end as well. But like, if your tight end is your kick returner, I'm not assuming that that's a guy that's maybe, moonlighting as an offensive tackle. All right. Like I'll just say
we need to get him on that Candler Cook dietary plan. We need to get him drinking the milk, eating the protein.
My man was going through 16,000 calories a day. Was that what it was? It was insane what Candler put his body through. Yeah, probably needs to go through something like that at this point. He's still trying for his first career catch too. So he's run 3 routes in his college career. As great as it was to see him be awesome in the spring game and all the positive things that have been said about him from a lot of people around the team, Brock Bowers himself talking him up, like let's kind of pump the brakes on that. We're discussing that because the expectation is Georgia will still want to run these 2 tight end sets. That has made this offense the last 2.5 seasons so difficult to defend because they really started this run with what Todd Monken was able to do with those guys and having those interchangeable pieces. You can disguise looks really, really well when you do that. And because of how versatile Bowers is, you're not tipping your hand. You're getting spots where a defense has certain personnel groups on the field and they are just not prepared to handle Bowers in coverage. And that's a greater challenge. The good news is I'm still pretty bullish on what Delp is going to be in this offense. I still think that he's going to be an excellent player. The beauty of Georgia running all of this 12 personnel, which is 1 running back, 2 tight ends, Grant Delp, or not Grant Delp. I was going to say Grant Delpit. Oscar Delp has played a ton this year. Well, he's played 259 snaps. That's a lot through 7 games. There are starting tight ends at the Power 5 level who have not played that many snaps. He is 8th among SEC tight ends in snaps. For a guy that has the best player at his position, not only in the country, but maybe in the history of the sport, that is a lot of reps, and that's the good news. It's nearly a 50-50 split in terms of run plays and pass plays that he's been out there for. So it's not just been like, oh, hey, we want to run the football. Let's bring in Oscar Delp. Oh, hey, we're throwing the ball. We're going to bring in Oscar Delp. He should step in. He should become an impact player in this passing game. I would expect that. Maybe instead of hoping that Lawson Lucky can step in and be the delp and have this role where he's getting 40 snaps a game or something. Maybe it's more versatile looks with a guy like Dylan Bell. Maybe he's lined up as a blocker in the backfield, something like that. Just something that can continue to disguise looks. That's the biggest thing for Georgia. Can have all the talent in the world, but as we've seen, it's still the scheme that has to be able to be there. And of course, like these receivers need to be able to step up. Ladd now has a few games under his belt. They need Dom Lovett to be the player that he was last year at Mizzou. He got a lot more reps in the games where Bowers was banged up, so I would expect more of him as well. Ra Thomas has kind of steadily seen his role increase while Arian Smith, he's a good player, man. Like, I feel like he was really overlooked in the offseason talking about the depth of this potential room, but like he's one of those guys that I think if Georgia is going to be undefeated, if and when Bowers comes back, it will be because Ra Thomas has stepped up and really taken his game to that next level, and he's made a bunch of highlight reel plays. Like I think they're going to rely on him a lot. Maybe not as much on Arian Smith. The snap count kind of going in the opposite direction with him. Georgia just has to find ways to keep this passing game going, especially when we know this defense is really not a lock to give you 60 minutes of short fields and turnovers like they've been for the majority of the 2 championship seasons. So like that's the nerdy breakdown of this and kind of where this looks. Reality, Georgia's playing this pass-fail without Bowers. It's simple. Like we spent so much time talking about style points, comparing Georgia teams. Oh, they lost this game this year in this fashion. How does it look compared to, the Mizzou game last year? We spent so much time talking about that. That's gone for now. Okay, it is. That schedule is also tougher than what anyone was saying in the preseason, which is why I think it's so stupid that people say in the preseason or even in September, hey, if Georgia loses a game, it won't make the playoff. Not to call out Joel Klatt, but Joel Klatt definitely said that. It's like, okay, so we're just not going to have any sort of context whatsoever. If there are still people holding on to that belief, ask them, okay, so then like it just doesn't matter that Georgia lost its best player in the middle of the season, and 3 of the next 4 games that they'll play, they will face a ranked opponent. 2 of those games will be away from home. Like, so the 2-time defending national champs still need to go 13-0 to be considered one of the 4 most deserving teams in the college football playoff? No, I don't think that's the case at all. I don't. Like that's lazy analysis in my opinion, but they should be treating this as pass fail. I'm not going to sit here and bash Georgia if this next month and a half, whatever, the rest of the regular season is more of TCU and every game is this 60 minutes of tension and taking years off the life of Georgia fans. If they find a way to stay unbeaten through that.
Listen, the Georgia fans that have made it this far are immortal. All right?
Great point, Will. Great point.
I don't think they could do worse than they have already.
Yeah, they've dealt with some stuff. And like they've dealt with a ton of injuries to star players over the years. Like, Perry was bringing this up too. It's kind of weird the way that it's played out, even going back to like AJ Green and then Todd Gurley, the way that things have happened with him. And I believe that this injury is more significant than George Pickens being out basically all of 2021. I think it's even more significant than Nolan Smith suffering his midseason injury last year. As valuable as that guy was as the senior captain in the middle of that defense, like they still have something so unique in Brock Bowers, and I don't want to discount that. Like, can this absolutely derail the path to a 3rd consecutive national title? Yes. Can Georgia also scare the crap out of everyone if Bowers returns to an undefeated team? Also, yes. So I think that's probably the best way to look at this moving forward. I am not writing Georgia off as a team that can win it all. I didn't predict them to win it all in the preseason. I'm not suddenly saying they're about to lose 2 games, but it's going to be a difficult road. And that is the bed that Georgia currently finds itself in. And to get there would be no small feat. What are your thoughts on this whole thing?
So I think that first off, I'm not a Georgia schedule apologist. You'll never see me sitting here talking about how hard Georgia's schedule is. But this is almost reminiscent of like one of those Buffalo Wild Wings commercials where they just like, oh, we got to get this game to go on longer. It's like they are without this dude who has been just even better than we thought that he could be this year because of moving on from Todd Monken and the entire, offense that we saw with Stetson. And he has literally been the guy that college football fans hoped he could be in year 3 when the tape has already been out on him for so long. When you have an offensive coordinator that needed to get his feet under him, when you have a new quarterback, when you have all these transfers coming in, when you have offensive linemen getting hurt, he has been, it's like the Snoop quote about this man doesn't miss. Like he just is always there. He's always been that guy. And so, yeah, I think we can shut the door on, I think the GOAT tight end conversation. I think he's already done enough, because it's not just doing it with, the great OC and the great talent. It's being this leader from the tight end position that I feel like we haven't seen. Gosh, I mean, maybe you can talk about Kyle Pitts, but that even they had Kyle Trask, like who was probably like the defense and like an offensive head coach. So like, but I don't know if I've seen like a tight end put a team on his back the way that Brock has this year, and his final numbers won't indicate how great he was when he played. And it feels like gotten better, dang near every game. He's had so many games where it just feels like he's unstoppable, that the game has turned, even the Auburn game, turned on Brock Bowers. So we're going to get to see a lot of growth out of a guy in Carson Beck, who I gave him props in my last podcast I could speak for, where I was talking about he's grown and matured. We'll see how much of that's real. We'll see how much of it was, all right, Brock Bowers down there somewhere, because a lot of the games have been that way in terms of we need to get something going. Let's just chuck it up to Brock and see what he can do for us. That being said, let me go back to Georgia's schedule. With no Brock Bowers, who has just been far, like, if we're going to talk about the MVP of a team, that's not a quarterback, that's pretty much what he's been here. And we have a neutral site game in the state of Florida against the University of Florida, probably their biggest rival. Then we have 3 straight ranked games. Mizzou, who no slouch, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Ole Miss, who am I to make fun of Ole Miss? They are 13th as we sit here right now. Way better than either of us thought they would be. Tennessee, they're on the schedule. And then we also have a rivalry game against Georgia Tech at the end of the year, which, and not to, again, give a ton of credit and be like, oh my gosh, Georgia Tech, but they did beat Miami. They aren't the Georgia Tech of last year. So as much as like this schedule has been clowned on for, lack of out of conference teams, and a lot of that is kind of just on Georgia Tech being mid. I mean, during the 2010s, like in 2000s, especially, like Georgia fans will tell you Tech was such a hard out.
The Oklahoma cancellation, though, like that's obviously that's impacted the way that the schedule was viewed coming into it. And so that was shaping a lot of perspective. And if we can adjust our expectations and realize, yes, there are actually some tricky games that a lot of teams would struggle with, I think that would be the better way to look at it. Even if they don't have that premier top 5 matchup and it's not going to come down to an Ohio State, Michigan type regular season finale or something like that, there will still be opportunities for Georgia to be tested and for them to be able to rack up quality wins.
100%. And it goes back to the grind of the SEC schedule. It's not that you have one matchup that you got to prepare for. It's 4-5 teams in a row are going to give you their absolute best shot, because they know it's like, if you slip up against Tennessee, okay, well, now you're in trouble. If you slip up against Ole Miss, you have to play almost perfect. And that's something that we've given Kirby and Saban, and at times Dabo, not as much, but we've given these guys like credit for, so many great teams have just been derailed by one of these dumb losses. And like that style of coaching, makes every game into a must-win game. And that's one thing about, this Georgia team. This might finally be the bulletin board material that Kirby needed to be like, hey, like, actually, defense, we really kind of do need you now. Like, we actually do need this team to play like a 2-time defending national champion on the defensive side of the ball. Not that their defense has been bad by any stretch of the imagination, but without the offense and Brock Bowers specifically to kind of like guide them through a tough matchup, it's like maybe the defense just starts hitting harder, starts forcing more turnovers. And actually that becomes the identity of this team, because it's going to be a completely different team without Brock Bowers.
I agree. And even if Delp does well, this is still going to have a different feel offensively for what they are trying to do. I am of the belief that if Georgia can kind of weather the storm and get through this, they will be in a spot in which nobody wants to play them in the college football playoff. They'll still be, depending on when we get him back. I won't talk about the SEC championship like he's going to be back, because that's still, that stuff's really up in the air. But all of a sudden, you're kind of just like, all right, well, Georgia's going to be at that point where it's like, just get us in. I don't care for the 4 seed. I don't care for the 1 seed, whatever. Just get us in. That is, I think, how they will view this, given the circumstances and what they're up against right now. One last thing on this. I was thinking about this the other day, and I meant to say it when we talked about Bowers against coming off the Auburn game, and I didn't. I wrote something after his freshman season that was basically, I hope he doesn't become Derek Stingley. And what I meant by that was, Like, I'm not trying to take shots at LSU. I'm not trying to do that.
I know.
What I meant by that was, I hope this isn't just a true freshman sensation that fades off and he's never quite at that level again, or it's just injuries here, injuries there, and we just never really see this guy at his peak. And I know he's not dead. I hope that we have not seen the last of Brock Bowers in a college uniform. I get all that, but I'm just so glad that he has not been that, and that it does feel like such a significant absence. And instead of talking about like, oh yeah, well, he's injured all the time, like whatever, he's out, like no big deal. And the way that we kind of felt about Stingley once, he would go down in his final college season, we're not having those conversations about Bowers because of how good he's been, how durable he's been, and being the best player on a national championship team, arguably in consecutive years. Definitely the best offensive player, I would say, consecutive national championship teams. The guy is he's been so tremendous. So wishing him a speedy recovery. It only takes like 25 minutes to go through the procedure, the tightrope procedure. Isn't that crazy? Modern medicine, man. Wild things. Wild thing. Okay. We want to talk about week 8. We got 4 games that we're going to get to. We're not going to do the Army LSU game, although I do have a lot of thoughts on the gun option. If you want to get at me and just talk gun option at some other point, I guess I'd be willing to do that.
Respecting the troops. We're huge on both of those things. So
we do, very much. All right, let's start with the only noon game that we have in the SEC, Mississippi State and Arkansas. Arkansas is a 5.5-point favorite. The over-under I have 11 Mike Wright snaps. Mike Wright, backup quarterback from Mississippi State. For those who haven't watched a whole lot of Mississippi State this year, they're like, oh, wait, why is that name familiar? Former starting quarterback at Vandy. We don't know for sure that Will Rogers will be a go. He and Woody Marks, they were both banged up in the Western Michigan game. That was before the bye week. They're coming off of the bye. Zach Arnett's been playing it pretty close to the vest. It makes sense given how different Will Rogers and Mike Wright are as players. Probably makes it a lot tougher to game plan for. Pittman was talking kind of about both of them and the challenges of facing a Mike Wright and how Mike Wright actually throws the ball better than people probably realize. That line movement, the way that it's kind of come down, I think it was Arkansas -7 early in the week, and now it's -5.5. That would, to me, suggest that we're going to see both of these guys, Will Rogers and Woody Marks, in this game. Take that for what it is. That doesn't mean it's a guarantee. But is it crazy to think that Mike Wright, even if Will Rogers does start, still has a package and maybe even moves the offense better than Will Rogers? I don't think that's crazy. I don't. He's averaging 11.
It's been hard to move it worse. So honestly, sometimes you just need to see. I think like we love Will Rogers. It's really not his fault almost at all. It's just kind of what's going on right now over there.
Yeah, it's just kind of the circumstances are what they are at this point. And those games in which he's truly looked comfortable in the offense have been so few and far between. Mike Wright's averaging 11 snaps per game this year. That's why the number was what it was for that over-under. Half of those snaps came in the Western Michigan game when Will Rogers was down. But he did have 11 snaps in the opener when Mississippi State was kind of struggling to put away an FCS team in the third quarter. They obviously got it going late. This is going to sound like a slap in the face to Will Rogers, but it's not my intent. I'd rather see a healthy Mike Wright than a limited Will Rogers.
Oh, yeah. That's not mean at all.
Yeah, like I just would. I think the offense would be better for it. Based on how the season's gone so far, I think he'd be playing into Wright's strengths more than Rogers' strengths in this offense. Mississippi State can run the ball too. And I think we saw early in the Alabama game that Arkansas has been better against the run, but they're not a given to stop it. And that was kind of the frustration that Alabama had, was like, we're running the ball really well against Arkansas. Why did we kind of get away from this? Why did Jalen Milroe have like 11 passing attempts in the second half? Didn't feel like they needed to do that. But this game comes down to something pretty simple. Who looks like the more desperate team? Sometimes like that's really at this point of the season when you realize you're not playing for a division championship, the desperation factor, it's hard to quantify it, but it's there. It's got to be there. You've got two teams that are winless in SEC play. Veteran quarterbacks, new schemes. It's been an uphill climb for both of them, kind of for different reasons. It's a bummer. It's a bummer. We talked about some of the potential issues there, and I thought it was kind of an underrated storyline coming into this season. It's unfortunate because I was higher on both of these teams. I had both of these teams winning 8 games, going 4-4 in SEC play. Doesn't really look like that's going to happen. I'm going to stick with what I've said at times about Arkansas, though. As bad as the offensive line looks, they have other areas of that team that are not as bad as what their record says they are. if that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
I still think Landon Jackson, talk about a guy LSU wouldn't mind having right about now. He's had a nice year. He's had a nice year. Pretty telling too that he was brought to SEC Media Days. Thought that was an interesting move by Sam Pittman to do that and really lean on that guy, a veteran in that spot. He's been what they hoped he would be for that group. And like, I think Arkansas, even without Rocket again, by the way, not playing in this one, bummer of a season he has had.
Jeez, man.
It sucks. Late surprise last week that he wasn't going to be able to play. It was like on the pregame radio show that they said, oh, by the way, Rocket Sanders is not going to be able to play. And I'm like, oh man, what a drag. What a drag. I feel bad for the kid because it's pre-draft year. My only hope is that he comes back next year. We get to see a little bit more of him as he was looking like a guy who was really taking off. But KJ, against this Mississippi State pass defense, I think he's going to have a day. I think he will. Might take 5 or 6 sacks. He might narrowly avoid a few others. Might have to throw off a few guys like a gnat on a cow's ass. Is that what Saban called it?
You got to prepare me. I'm going to have a bellowing laugh. I mean, if you're going to say that, it was the last thing I thought you were going to say. Continue.
Sorry about that, kids. Look, I think they're going to be able to take advantage of some of those mismatches on the outside. The coach who loses this game, a lot of uncertainty moving forward. This isn't a fireball. I don't want to say we don't throw that around lightly. We save that for 2016 Tiger Bowl. That's really the peak fireball. I don't think that we can totally say that this is in that category, but I always say optics can sway these decisions. They really can. If fan support down the stretch for the loser of this game, or even the winner is not like out of the woods. If fan support starts to wane, you're seeing crowds kind of empty out. ADs are looking down. They're talking to people in those suites, and they're saying, man, this is bad. This is not good. We got to make a change. We got to get some new juice in here. They could have situations in which they say, you know what, we're going to go in a new direction. I think Zach Arnett's probably safe. He got to hire his own staff. He's not just an interim coach. The buyout, I looked it up today. The buyout is $9 million. So even less than Moorhead. Again, if you're not paying in that 8-figure range for a buyout for a Power 5 head coach, consider yourself lucky. That's pretty rare in this day and age.
You're in a situationship, basically, if you're a coach. It's like they don't really want to lock you down, but you're there, just kind of doing the dishes a little bit, but don't mess up.
Yeah, it's awkward. And especially at Mississippi State, too, with the contracts in the state of Mississippi. They can only be 4 years in length unless you're Lane Kiffin. If you've got some sort of outside influence to be able to have that contract be more than 4 years, then it's a little bit awkward when you don't get that year tacked on. You're like, wait a minute. Oh, that's not good. We would obviously look into that in the way that we did with Mike Leach as well. I like both of these coaches. I know their athletic directors both do as well. It's a results-based business. The result on Saturday feels significant for the future of both programs. Do you think Arkansas is able to get on the board, or is this a little bit of a Zach Arnett, like, hey, I actually do know what I'm doing. I'm not just an interim guy. I can go on the road. I can win this conference game.
I think and honestly hope that Arkansas can get on the board with a win against Mississippi State. I think that this is definitely more.
Wait. You think and hope? What about your Kevin Barbay OC draft? The Kevin Barbay stock is taking a hit if they're not winning.
That ship has sailed. We're trying to recoup the losses. It's like the Bitcoin stock. It's like, might as well just, it's not worth selling necessarily because it's never going to go up again, but might as well just see where it's going. Yeah. So no, I mean, I think for Pittman, he's not a first year head coach. He's a guy that we've seen, have good teams struggle a little bit. And I think he really needs this win, especially considering, you still got to play Ole Miss. You still got to play Mizzou. You have like some games down the stretch that are very losable. And so I think that I think they have a better team. Let me start there, not just thinking about it as a fanboy. Now, not convincingly. I don't want to, it's not like, it's Alabama or something here, but yeah, I think you said this in the pregame. This has got to be one of the most just sad and disappointing matchups I've ever seen in this conference. I mean, when you look at two guys that were pretty much just, number 2 and 3 in the SEC preseason quarterback, like second in the SEC, the preseason all SEC teams. It was Jaden Daniels and then some version of like Will Rogers, KJ. Like we kind of talked about how those guys had definitely earned it. And they were both guys coming in with new offenses that we thought pretty much the teams honestly couldn't get much worse. Mike Leach obviously tragically passed away, very different from Arkansas's situation. But the way that these teams have both been bad has just been so shocking. I mean, the fact that Mississippi State's defense has fallen off a cliff, and we've talked about it ad nauseum with Arnett, 335 appreciator, a guy that everybody has wanted, and that somehow Mike Leach was able to keep in the building over and over and over again through like some type of mutual respect or whatever. And maybe Mike Leach was kind of training him up to be the future head coach, and obviously he's gotten that job now. But the fact that Mississippi State's defense has fallen off a cliff and Arkansas's offensive line have fallen off cliffs, and because of that, we have two quarterbacks who needed a new offensive scheme to maybe have a shot at the next level. We're looking at Will Rogers, who's played terribly and is now hurt. We're looking at KJ, who is just this unsackable freak, and he has been sacked, been beaten to heck. And you're looking at two guys right now that, I mean, I hate to say it, but it's like their NFL futures are just looking not great. And they trusted both of these coaching staffs, and it feels like they've kind of been let down. And so it's a big bummer. I think that, but we were really, really, really looking forward to this game. We kind of talked about the LSU, throw them in there because Jaden was number one, but the LSU Arkansas game was a great game. It was two quarterbacks, playing their butts off, but Mississippi State has just not been there offensively or defensively. But again, offensively, I like Barbe, but it was always going to be a big adjustment. I was just wrong. I get it, but it was just always going to be a big adjustment. With defense, it's like, how are you bad at defense? It's both of these teams are equally shocking in how they're bad. That's what I'm saying. So yeah, I do like Arkansas here just because I think that number one, they have their starting quarterback. Oh, I mean, you get the Rocket in there too, man. Rocket's a guy that we would love to see all the time. And with the way his season's gone, he's just been banged up all year. He kind of started to get right a little bit. And like you said, random injury designation, which we always hate to see. College football's so weird about that. In the NFL, that would reward an investigation. Anyway, so Rocket's a guy who's not going to play. So it's like, this is a game that you could have scheduled as an Arkansas fan and be like, I for sure want tickets to this game, but we lock these in at, $200-$300 and feel like I just made an investment. And now it's like just going to be tough. And I want to say something completely unrelated. You were talking about guys in the boxes. I would love to do like a documentary on like ADs or GMs in like losing seasons and just like see what they do on a daily basis. Cause like, I wonder what it's like to just like walk around like the press box at Arkansas right now and just like talk to people. It's gotta be interesting.
Yeah. I think if you're Hunter Yurachek, you want this to work because that's your guy. You've gone to bat for him. I've made the joke before. I wonder how many times Hunter Yurachek sits in his mahogany chair on a Saturday night, pours himself a bourbon, and thinks to himself, dang, I hired Eric Musselman and I hired Sam Pittman. At certain points and what this thing was looking like coming off of 2021, I think there were probably a lot of nights where Hunter Yurachek felt really good about that. And at the same time, you have to evaluate what you have moving forward. And if you think it's a situation where you still think you have a guy that can turn things around, then you stick with him. If you think you have a guy that nobody believes in anymore, it's like sometimes the optics are totally different than what we look at from the outside. It's like when I come back to talking about Lovie Smith back in the day. People are like, how could the Bears fire him after like a 10-6 season? And it's like, well, he kind of lost the locker room. Like fan support was really, really down. It was time for a change. Everything felt really stale. There was a rift between he and ownership. And like sometimes stuff like that happens. I'm not saying that there's not alignment in these places at places like Arkansas, at Mississippi State or anything like that. But sometimes those are things that we're not always privy to. We're just not. And so I'll be interested to see kind of the way that this game plays out as it relates to that. But yeah, I was texting somebody the other day about how I'm just hoping the silver lining of this year for KJ means he's coming back. Because I don't know that he's helped himself from an NFL standpoint.
This is Arkansas fans are going to come after me for this one, but it's like, why would you? I would transfer if I'm coming back to college. Why would you come play behind this offensive line again?
KJ committed to a Chad Morris, Arkansas. Let's not forget that.
I know. And that's my point. It's like, brother, I was okay with this year's 1 and 2 over here in like, what, is it year 4 now? It's like, come on, but man.
You've also seen the downside of going to a new scheme. And you could have looked at this situation this year and thought, okay, well, at least if I come back next year and if I'm in the same scheme, and I don't know what Dan Enos' future is going to be. So I'm not saying that he's locked into a job next year either. So maybe he's going through a new scheme in Arkansas. But there is still risk in going to a place and experiencing a new scheme. Devin Leary, guy who is going to a new place, and the new scheme just hasn't lined up with what he likes to do, and Kentucky fans are really frustrated about it. There are certain transfer quarterbacks that go into a situation where they think it's going to be really advantageous. They think they have good surroundings, and then it ends up not working. So selfishly, I'm just holding on to hope that KJ is going to be back for another season. He didn't rule that out at SEC Media Days when he was asked about that. Something to keep in mind. But yes, this game, the Desperation Bowl, yeah, I like Desperation Bowl more than the Toilet Bowl. I think that's more fair.
Yeah, we'll be glued to this one. That's the thing. It'll be compelling because it could go a billion. This game could honestly end up blowing either way. It'll probably be a close game though.
This game and then Penn State, Ohio State will be the two games I'll have on and in that noon window. 3:30 CBS game. Tennessee, Bama. Tennessee's 17th in the country. Bama's 11th in the country. Bama's an 8.5-point favorite. I want to say that line has come down even more since I put this together. The over-under I have is 4 Tennessee sacks. Sounds low. It is low. It's what Tennessee's averaging. Alabama's allowed at least that in each of the last 6 games. Only Power 5 team to have allowed more sacks this season, Colorado. That's not great company, at least not there. That's not even including the pre-snap penalties and all the issues that they have faced. That group's a mess. You were right. I was wrong. It is not an elite SEC offensive line. I can sit here and say that. Also weird to say, this is the biggest mismatch in this game. Tennessee's pass rushers against that Bama offensive line. It is crazy to think about that. Like I was asking Marler earlier, can you remember a time in which that's been the case at all? Like maybe 07 Saban, year 1 Saban. That's the last time you would say that about this matchup, where it's even an advantage for that Tennessee front against Alabama's offensive line. It's just, It's very weird in that regard. And if you haven't been paying attention to what Tyler Barron, Aaron Beasley, James Pierce Jr. have been doing, like you've been missing out. Those guys have been everywhere. They're averaging a combined 4 TFLs a game. It's not a matter of whether or not Tennessee is going to get to Jalen Milroe. It's not a matter of if. And some Bama fans might be upset.
What happens then? It's like,
it is.
Does he throw the ball? Does he fumble the ball? Does he run out of bounds strangely? What is he going to do?
Yes, Will. Exactly that. Does he connect like he did late in that Arkansas game to get that huge first down in that spot where they desperately needed it? And you're like, oh, it looks like he's throwing this ball for grabs. Does he drift out of bounds 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage instead of throwing it away and he takes a 4-yard loss? Does he get sacked? Does he fumble because he doesn't see backside pressure? Like, what does Jalen Milroe do? Does he take off with his legs and gain 30 yards? I don't know. Spin the wheel. I have no idea. Jalen Milroe doesn't even know what Jalen Milroe is going to be able to do in those spots. He doesn't.
And that's why he's unstoppable, because if he doesn't know what he's going to do, how can the defensive coordinator?
That's a great point. Tough game plan for a guy who doesn't know what he's going to do. Interesting comments, Jalen Milroe this week, talking about the Tennessee pass rush. Austin Hannon had the quote that made the rounds. Milroe was asked about Tennessee being 3rd in the nation in sacks, and he said, quote, "We're going to have a lot of fun. We don't care about none of that." Interesting move. Look, I like to trash talk a little bit. I like to jaw a little. If I were a Tennessee player, if I was getting a Jalen Milroe, if I was able to put him on his back, I might just stand over him one time and say, "We having fun yet?"
Are we having fun yet? I love that. Yeah.
I might say that one time. Look, I don't have a rooting interest in this game. I'd probably be okay with somebody saying that after Jalen Milroe said that in the pregame. Then, Jalen Milroe throws a touchdown pass, and then he says, "Yeah, we're having fun now." That's the way this works. That's a rivalry game. Let's get Jalen Milroe mic'd up. Let's get Tyler Barron mic'd up. I would love to be able to see that. If someone said that
about that is it puts him in a terrible spot, because he can't be like, "I trust my offensive line. They played great this year." Because that's how you end up with a coach that like JC had, where it's like, "Yeah, actually, this offensive line is not playing great," and then he gets like memed. Just like when Jawad Johnson came out and defended Pete Carmichael, the Saints offensive coordinator. Everybody's like quote tweeting and dunking on him. It's like sometimes you just got to be like, "Yep, next question, man."
Yeah, and Saban saying that he doesn't see a lot of differences between Joe Milton and Hendon Hooker. Okay, that makes one of us.
Who are you watching, bro?
Yep, I'll agree to disagree with the goat on that one, but yeah, something tells me Bama will prepare for him a little bit differently. This is a very different game than last year. Last year, 52-49. The over/under for this game is 48 points. Well.
I struggle to see either of those teams getting there, to be honest.
I mean, goodness gracious. Like,
last year we had. Sorry, good.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like, how crazy this game felt just in terms, like from an offensive, explosion standpoint, and how back and forth it felt like Jalen Hyatt was an 80-yard touchdown waiting to happen. Bryce Young, the plays that he's making down the stretch, you're like, this is fun. This is a little bit reminiscent of that 2013 Bama A&M game that was just, I think, as Gary Danielson said, basketball on turf. It was fun. And this could be fun in a different way, a very different way. But it also feels like a game in which neither team trusts their quarterback to make a big time throw. You know what I don't trust?
And yet, what will they both be doing, Connor?
I think they'll be making big time throws. I don't know.
They'll be trying them.
They'll be trying. Who knows? If you're up 2 touchdowns, you don't have to make a ton of big time throws in the fourth quarter. Just saying.
Yeah.
I don't really trust Joe Milton going into Tuscaloosa and winning. I don't. We've already gone through the guys who have done just that. And outside of like a Jordan Jefferson, 2011 LSU. Yeah, I got that right. He was starting quarterback that game, I think. Right, Will? Game of the century.
He sure was, Connor.
Didn't matter.
Shouldn't have been.
But
he sure was.
He gets credited with a win for 9-6. Sure. Okay. QB wins. Pretend
Les
that was
Miles sure thought that was the reason why we did win that game for whatever reason.
Exactly. Everybody outside of that, though, certain bit of swag, certain bit of confidence to match that ability. Joe Milton doesn't have that. At least he hasn't shown he has that. Against SEC competition this year, 7.1 yards per pass attempt, 59% passing, 4-4 TD-9T ratio, an interception once every 22 passes, 15 rushes for 44 yards, no rushing scores. Not great. Not great. I worry about that because I love a lot of the elements of this Tennessee team. I really do. Like, I think defensively, what Tim Banks has been able to build with that group up front, the way that they still, even when it feels like they lack that explosive playability on offense, the way that they still run the football, those things are great. They're really, really good. But I think that there are certain elements of that team, specifically the running game, that might not be at that extremely elite level that it'll take to win this game. Unless they're able to get 3 turnovers or something like that, and they get these short fields or something like that, I have some questions about that. So I do think the spread is too big for how low scoring I think this game is going to be, but I'll go with Bama to win this 21-14. I feel like that's been a popular pick of mine, like 21-14 this year for Bama specific games. Definitely didn't have that for USF. I don't think I had an on the record prediction for USF though. Yeah, that explains why. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, because we didn't even preview that game. That was the best part. This is definitely a juxtaposition, and I love that you kind of like brought that up, where it's like last year we had Bryce Young's legacy is so interesting. So he's the first Heisman winning quarterback in Bama history. Is he the best quarterback in Bama history? Hard to say, because usually Bama fans will tell you, or like college football fans, you probably need to win a championship to be the best Bama quarterback ever. But like, when you see him play football, he just kind of looked like the best Bama quarterback I've ever seen. So I can really tell you, didn't feel like it was really his fault when they lost the games that they lost. So in like probably the most storied college football program, the best quarterback ever was in this game. And then Tennessee, probably their best guy since Peyton Manning, I feel, at least for a single season. As much as we love Josh Dobbs, probably better than Josh Dobbs.
I'll take Hooker over Dobbs. over Dobbs.
NFL starter. Quick aside, how much money, like that shocked the heck out of you that guy is like been pretty decent NFL starter this year.
Josh Dobbs, one unread text from a certain Conor O'Gara.
Wow.
One unread text. I know. He blew me off.
Hollywood now.
Haven't been rooting for Josh Dobbs since he blew me off. No, I'm just kidding. That happens all the time. You want to trust me. Like, I could go down the road of the amount of times that's happened, where even when I've been talking to people and then to get ghosted or something at the last second. No, that is surprising. Definitely did not anticipate Josh Dobbs. I thought when I was going to have him on, I thought I was going to be able to have him on this offseason, and we're going to be talking about what he's going to be doing post football, like building rockets and stuff like that. And instead, much different conversation. He's an NFL starter. So I guess he had every right to blow me off.
Yep, there you go. He just believed himself. But yeah, point being, like, those were the two. And like Peyton Manning is just like a Hall of Famer at 2 levels. Like, he's obviously the GOAT of like almost every program. So it's like, yeah, probably like the like two of the best quarterbacks in the histories of those storied programs we saw last year play. And it was one of like an all-time game. You know, how many times was that game won lost? You know, you talk about the field goal post getting carried down the river and all that. And now it just feels like two completely, like the jerseys are the same, the fan bases are the same. Everything else feels completely different. Because even you look at Tennessee's receivers last year and how awesome they were. And now it's just kind of like Squirrel White and some dudes, and like Brew McCoy's hurt, so I won't like totally say it was like a roster issue. It's just like they just don't have the same juice that they had last year. So yeah, to set all that to say, got Alabama in this one. I'm 100% with you. I think. Oh, and then also let's throw in there that like Josh Heupel has never really had a good defense ever as a head coach, and now like that's the strength of their team, and they're winning like rock fights. It's just hilarious. Like, so point being, like, yeah, I think a lot of the numbers here are gonna favor Bama. I mean, I think that as much as I do want to credit Tennessee's run defense, like we were talking about, A&M had a great run defense, and their quarterback just kind of lost them the game. And I think we're probably going to see something pretty similar here. So yeah, I think that it's the Alabama team is so fascinating to me. It's like you talked about the offensive line. It's like, yeah, I guess I was right about that technically, but it's like, how much did it matter? Because they're still just whooping everyone. It's so shocking. You turn on an Alabama game and you don't see an Alabama team, but yet they're still rolling everyone because it takes so much belief in yourself to just break the chains of Bama oppression. And it's like when it's at the end of a game, kind of like with Arkansas, it's like we just don't have the juice. We've never seen ourselves do it. We haven't seen our dads do this. And so point being, like, I think that, you know, Joe Milton is not Hendon Hooker, and even Hendon Hooker was at home in a back and forth shootout. So yeah, I think that this is probably going to be a get back game. But yeah, I mean, if Saban loses two straight to Tennessee, man, he's gonna think about hanging it up, because should be a bunny for him. This is the type of game that he never loses in his history, where you have a rivalry game that they kind of steal one from you. Usually that next game, I know this is an LSU fan, is one of the worst days of your year as a fan of that team.
Ole Miss 2014, 2015. That's the last time that consecutive years Saban lost to the same program. I'll push back a little bit on Bama rolling everybody. I think Bama's getting by everybody.
Facts, yeah.
I think there's a difference, and it makes you say, okay, we're one play here, one play there away. Tennessee wins the turnover battle or something like that happens. Their margin for error is a lot slimmer, and this game could come down to that. And I want to get ahead of this. Let me just throw out this possibility, because I don't want to be caught off guard on Sunday and all of a sudden have to recalibrate how I'm viewing the entire SEC race in the latter half of the season. If Tennessee wins this game, if Tennessee goes into Bama and wins, it changes so much about the conference this year, and maybe about the sport as a whole. Suddenly, we're saying to ourselves, wait a minute, could Tennessee knock off a Bowerless Georgia team in Knoxville? All of a sudden, for Georgia, that's a win against possibly a top 10 team on the road. And maybe Tennessee, with just the one Florida loss, are they like this smash mouth team that we've been sleeping on because of how underwhelming Joe Milton's been? Are we all of a sudden, can 60 minutes change the entire mood of Tennessee? Because last year in this game, it was a little bit different. It was this rise to get to this point. And it was like, hey, man, if not now, then when? Like with this Tennessee team, with the things that they're doing so unbelievably well, like it feels like, even though we're still reluctant to predict it, there's still a world in which this could happen. And then who knows, it's one of those years. People are saying it feels like 98, whatever the case. Like this season has felt so different because of the offense and the identity of this team. And so could all of a sudden our expectations of Tennessee be vastly different if they win this game? Yes, definitely yes. Alternatively, Tennessee gets crushed. Joe Milton doesn't look like the guy. The chance for Nico Yamaleava. They are heard from every nook and cranny of the Volunteer State. That's on the table as well. A lot of ways that this thing can go. A lot of things hanging in the balance for Tennessee. To go on the road and win in Tuscaloosa, in my opinion, still a ridiculously difficult feat to pull that off, and would be unbelievably impressive if they did that.
Yeah, and I don't want to discredit, because you're absolutely right. I wasn't obviously on the last podcast. Like, big credit to Arkansas and what they did, because I did not give them a chance either. And so, yeah, I think with these rivalry games, it's always just hard to tell. But yeah, like I think it just unfortunately comes down to Joe Milton, which is just so tough. And this is a guy that, and you gave me that stat about like they were last in the SEC in like I don't know what the number was, but deep plays, basically deep shots. And I don't think that really improves against A&M. It's not like they were like getting up and down the field with ease. So that's the part of it that makes me feel like I'm not confident in Tennessee winning on the road, because if this Tennessee team, like, we know that, say what you will about Milroe, he's going to slang that thing. And so funny enough, Bama is in a way built to come back because they're used to the quarterback committing turnovers. So no deficit is too big. Their defense plays well. And one thing about Jalen Milroe, he is turnover. It's like he could walk on the field and think that he just threw 3 touchdowns if he fumbled the ball. He doesn't care. And so he'll get right back out there. So that it's so funny that weirdly, like, the deep ball is fully what's missing from this Tennessee team, because if they were able to do what they did early against Florida and stretch the field and actually get like a Josh Heupel style offense going, this team is so radically different. And they have a quarterback who could, like, I feel like, hit me as I'm talking about him here in Atlanta, and yet he just can't connect with his receivers. So yeah, that's as tough as it is. It's like they have all the tools to actually be a way better team than they are, because the defense was the question mark last year. They were just so thin and they couldn't, play 60 minutes down the stretch with a few teams. But they're still a good to great team. It whooped LSU in Death Valley. So yeah, I think that it's so tough when it's in a way kind of similar to LSU, where it's like, well, you have all the tools to be this great team, but there's like this one obvious thing. But with Tennessee, it's so much more fixable. And I don't think that, we're already dang near, I guess, halfway through the season, not quite halfway through the games that matter, but it's like, you hope that the guy could just wake up and be like, what if I just lean into this and I just uncork 10 throws a game? Because that just radically changes their offense, man.
I think that ship has sailed. I truly do.
So wild, right?
Like, when Ramel Keaton's had some drops, and like he dropped another play that should have been 6 last week, and it's still the lack of trust in that is part of it. And it's not that they think it's an automatic turnover or anything like that, but Milton and his struggles to throw off platform, they don't truly have a burner like a Jalen Hyatt, which that might be an unpopular opinion because Dante Thornton is supposed to be that guy. Ramel Keaton can be that guy. I've seen Squirrel White be that guy at times, but like, it's just not as easy. And if we did like an in-depth breakdown, we'd probably see that teams are defending them a little bit different, and they want them to be able to try and dink and dunk their way down the field. Just hasn't necessarily been the case. Don't know that this is a get-right game for the Tennessee passing game in this one.
Meanwhile, Milroe looks at Jermaine Burton, who's been like pretty trash his whole football career. Sees prime Calvin Johnson. He's just like, go up and get it, buddy. We got this one. Right.
Yeah. By the way, Burton had 2 catches last week. Just for those saying like this is going to be a turn the corner type game, I'm saying I'm still not there. Hope to see some big time plays in this one from both quarterbacks, because it would make it a lot more exciting. All right, South Carolina, Mizzou, number 20 Mizzou, 7-point favorite. Mizzou is. The over-under I have 0.5 healthy feet for Shane Beamer by day's end. He's got one.
Good one. He's going to kick something else.
Got his other foot still for now. In case you missed it, Beamer's foot, it got into a fight with a certain object, an unknown object, after the Florida loss. And again, we don't know what that object was, but we do know that object won and Beamer's foot lost. Broken bone in his foot. Fire up the Ed Reed I'm hurt dog video.
Yep.
I'll say this. And Will, I know you have thoughts on this as well, and I want to get to that. If you don't like Beamer, you're saying that it's a sign that South Carolina is melting down. He kind of basically said, I know everything you're about to use against me. He did the old 8 Mile thing in his press conference. And talked about how like there's going to be a narrative out there that I'm like, that I'm melting down, we're losing control, whatever. And if you don't like him, you're going to say that he can't handle the ebbs and flows of this job. And while I do think that there is a certain bit of poise and level-headedness that is needed to pull a team out of the rut like the one South Carolina is in, give me genuine passion all day. Okay? Give me genuine passion. Well, you tweeted about this before the foot injury, before Michael Scott burned his foot. And you tweeted, you had like a quote tweet of the cut up of Beamer in post-game pressers, wherein obviously somebody who doesn't like him is trying to be like, this guy sucks. Look here, look here, look here, which you could do with literally every single coach. And right. the people that are defending Beamer right now seem like they're few and far between. I'm asking, like, you had thoughts about that, about like,
Oh yeah, I was agreeing with you because I'm not even gonna say he's a super popular guy right now, but yeah, I think that it's funny. It just shows me like how joyless of a fan base Clemson is. Like I look at a video that they're showing that Bieber is like a passionate, fired up, fun guy, and they put the roller coaster of love thing behind it. And I watched that video like 20 times. I was like, I want to go play for this guy. He seems fun. Like I don't want to see the worst thing in the world is when you like are struggling and the coach is just like kind of checked out or over it. Like that to me is it's always that has been the bane of my existence, especially when you get one of those coaches that's like indignant and like doesn't want to take responsibility and doesn't want to like say doesn't want to acknowledge the problem. Like the thing with Shane Beamer is that he's going to tell you exactly how he feels, and you can talk about whether it's good or bad. But I'm kind of right there with you. It's like, look, for South Carolina, they obviously have been kind of up and down, honestly, since Spurrier left. I think that's a big hot take. But I think that with Beamer, it's like he inherited just like an all-time bad situation. Now, not even thinking about when Spurrier left and they like that whole thing, but also like Muschamp and that whole thing. And I think that, he brought in some solid talent. He's brought in, these guys that we've seen that we love, Leggett, Wells, Spencer Rattler, all these guys. But yeah, I think that, basically all
Leggett
I'm
was
saying
there
here,
before, by the way. I think Leggett was a Muschamp era recruit as well.
oh, you know what? You're right. But he also at least unlocked him and used him differently. Let's say
True.
that, because that's a
Very
dude
true.
that they did not know what to do with him until the other day. So point being, like they've like kind of they brought in like they've kind of rebuilt the program in a way. And so it's like when you are part of a joyless fan base like Clemson, and I'll pick on them because they have the most unlikable coach. And I said this in the replies. It's like, I understand people hate Brian Kelly. I fully get it. The people that have been taught that Dabo Swinney is correctly doing football and that like that's how the football experience should be is just furious for 60 minutes. And you watch a guy like Shane Bieber having fun, and you're just like, that's not how it's done. It's like, okay, man, like what do you oh, maybe we should just all hire the next Nick Saban. Would that work for you? It's like, yeah, I think that like he's an interesting guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think that in an era where like people are getting more and more censored and everything is getting less and less fun, we shouldn't punish that guy for like having some emotion and caring when they lose. Like it kills me when coaches just pretend like everything is cool or try to blame someone else whenever there's a horrible loss,
I think that sucks. I think that's the worst when you're sitting up there. As a fan, what would you rather have? Would you rather have somebody getting up there trying to spin zone their way out of 2 and 4 and tell you, oh, well, we've done this right, we've done this right, we've done this right. And, everything's actually fine. Everybody just overreacts. It's like, no, I'd rather have a coach that is willing to show passion. Like, I'm not letting Beamer off the hook. I'm not doing that because he knows
it's a bad year for them.
It's
bad. Like, no questions. Yeah.
Dead wrong. Hand up. Worst preseason prediction. South Carolina will finish second in the East. Way wrong. He knows as well as anyone, it is one thing to have weaknesses. It's another to have weaknesses that are so bad that everyone and their mother knows exactly what they are. That's the problem right now. In this conference, it is darn near impossible to win games when that's the case. And that's been the case for South Carolina. Unless you're Alabama and you have unbelievable talent and you can overcome that. But even sometimes then, it's still really difficult. I'll save some of my thoughts on this game for the interview with Alyssa because we talk about both the South Carolina Mizzou side for that. But against South Carolina secondary, which is dead last in FBS right now, dead last in passing yards per game allowed, there should be a lot of mismatches for Brady Cook. I would think that he's going to get to the line of scrimmage and he's just going to go, what's the Birdman meme? Birdman gif when he's just sitting there like that.
He's I don't even know what that's called, but he's a hungry dude. He's waiting for his pizza rolls to be finished.
Yep, exactly. I think this is a bounce back game for Luther Burden. Give me all the Theo East in this one. I don't think Mizzou totally shuts down the South Carolina offense, but I think Mizzou covers with a 35-21 win. They make it 5 in a row against South Carolina. One of the weirder rivalry trends that you will see is that Mizzou has dominated this matchup in recent memory. Do we realize what this would mean if that happened? If Mizzou wins this game, well, that would be the first winning season for Drink at Mizzou. Pretty crazy.
No, stop.
Yep. First 7-1 start since 2013 is on the table. All Mizzou has to do is beat this South Carolina team that has 1 win in SEC play, 2 wins overall.
Oh no. I was so committed to Mizzou winning this game.
And then you heard me say that? Yeah.
Because it's like, it's too perfect. It's like, this is what Drake always does. Where it's like, oh, this is a walkover. We should just beat this team. We'll be good. Everyone
Not
will
even
respect
drink.
us.
This would be the Mizzou way. This would be Mizzou losing to my alma mater, Indiana, like they did 10 years ago, watching Tevin Coleman run for like 800 yards in that game when it's like, wait a minute. I thought we were a team that was getting ready to go play for a division championship. They did. They did end up winning the division, but then they just puked on their shoes in that way. I don't think that ends up being the case, but if Mizzou loses this game, everybody will be like, oh, yep, here we go again. Should have seen this coming a mile away.
Yep. I think I will say I'm going to use my logical brain here, Connor, which is that Brady Cook, hopefully he's, coming out of his cage. He's feeling just fine. He's not going to be the scared guy that we saw. He's already had the big win in his pocket. And I think that hopefully he will be a stabilizer and can say, okay, we have these two great receivers. I love Weiss, man. Like I said, I started keying in on him against LSU, and I've just kind of slowly started watching the way that guy operates. You get two great receivers. You have a great running back. And the South Carolina defense is just completely listless right now. And it's at home. There shouldn't be a logical way that South Carolina could win this game. My logical brain is fully just picking Mizzou. But if they lose, we know exactly what it looks like. That's all I'm going to say.
I think for all the points you just brought up, with how bad of a year this has been for South Carolina, knowing it's 4 straight losses in this game, and just to make matters worse, you've got the broken foot for Shane Beamer. Toby Keith game potential is on the table.
Oh, yeah.
It's on the table. By the way, shout out to Pate Bryan. He's been all over the Toby Keith tweets at the SDS Pod account on Twitter. Yep. Love those. Keep sending those our way. I'm seeing this, all the different ways that a Toby Keith song describes a current predicament in the SEC, not just a "How do you like me now?" ain't as good as I once was. I'm just saying.
Also, shout out to that guy who when Connor tweeted, "Oh, Will's not on the podcast," so my reply, "Good, I'll listen now." Thanks, man. I can see, was the cat week, but I can see you, bro. Anyway,
haters gonna hate as they always do. All right, let's talk about the Ole Miss Auburn showdown. Number 13, Ole Miss, 6.5 point favorite. Over under 2.5 references to Lane Kiffin's flirtation with the Auburn job. I'm going to trigger some Ole Miss fans by saying that, but everything I've ever been told about that situation was that it truly took a late push from Ole Miss to prevent that from happening. And that's if you're an Ole Miss fan, he picked you. Okay, he picked you.
Right.
Let's acknowledge that. Let's acknowledge that it's okay if that is the case. There was very much a world, in my opinion, that Kiffin could have been at Auburn, and who knows? Maybe Hugh Freeze would have returned to Ole Miss. Probably not. But you know what? Never say never. We're living in a world in which Lane, Freeze, Bobby Petrino, they're all back in the SEC. So who knows? Crazier things have happened. Go figure that it is Hugh Freeze who actually has the reunion game, not Lane, even though it's going to feel like that a little bit. Granted, Freeze already got the reunion game out of the way when he was at Liberty, when he faced Ole Miss a couple years ago. That Liberty team definitely had a better offense than this current Auburn team. Malik Willis forever. The reunion that I'm here for, and the one that you're probably here for as well, JJ Pegues reunion.
Yeah. Oh, God, yes. I'm so glad you said that.
If I were a betting man, and I haven't looked at the odds on this, so don't take this to the bank. I don't even know if this is out there on sportsbooks, but if it is, I say Lane is getting him in on a goal line package. That would be such a Lane move to line him up either at tight end, fullback, single back, whatever, just to twist the knife and say to Auburn, hey, you remember JJ Pegues? He's ours now. And he's realized it's the second season there, and he got to face him last year. He got his reunion out of the way as well. But still, he's turned himself into a really good run defender for Ole Miss. 4th highest graded interior defensive lineman against the run in the SEC. 3 TFLs, couple of sacks this year. Ole Miss is 10th in FBS in TFLs per game, 7.8. They get in the backfield. They do a lot of things that kind of make you go, eh. They do get in the backfield. That is what Pete Golding's defense has done. That's probably their strength. Auburn's allowing 6.8 TFLs per game, which is pretty startling for a team that only averages 65 offensive plays per game. Drops to about 61 against Power 5 competition. Not great. But we could. I'm leaving this possibility open after a few days of speculation about this. We could see a very different offense if Robbie Ashford's increased role is a starting role. I'm just saying if. Okay, I don't want to rule that out. Maybe it won't be. Maybe it's just a really short leash for Peyton Thorne. But if Freeze turns Auburn into a service academy and just tries to feed off of that crowd and says, you know what, I'm not going to worry about the long-term outlook of my offense. Let me just go try and win a football game. This is not the worst plan. Now, Ole Miss has actually been pretty solid against the run, though if you think back to last year's game, Robbie Ashford was quarterback of this team, and Auburn was in total free fall. They went into Oxford and they ran for over 300 yards. So just saying, something to keep in the back of your mind. What I do know is that contrary to the tongue-in-cheek column that Joseph Goodman wrote for AL.com, Lane is not getting fired if he loses this game. Love that Lane tweeted that out. Of course he did. Why wouldn't he? I was thinking about this. What is Lane's best SEC road win? Tennessee golf ball game? The Tennessee reunion, probably, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that Tennessee team won 7 regular season games. Probably that. The next road game after that one was at Auburn, and Ole Miss lost that in the midst of a 10-win regular season. Matt Corral. I was feeling at that time like, who knows? Maybe the Brian Harsin thing is going to work out. Kind of in a really good spot, middle of year one. They're heading in the right direction. Just be a really solid Ole Miss team.
You've hired genius offensive coordinator Mike Bobo.
Of course, who could forget? Since that game, since Auburn beat that Ole Miss team in 2021, which was the last time, obviously, that Ole Miss was at Jordan-Hare, Auburn's 2-13 against SEC competition. And one of those games was the Mizzou game. Mevis missed the gimme. Mizzou somehow fumbled going in the end zone. So, could really be 1-14 against SEC competition.
That game. Funny that game. It was 1933.
Never have I seen more a team say, here, we don't want this. This game is yours. We're not worthy. Here, just have it. Auburn, you deserve it. You got great fans. Just have it. Take it. We're not good enough for this. I can't talk myself into an Auburn win. I can't do that. Just can't do it. I can, however, talk myself into Auburn covering. Ole Miss wins 28-24.
So eventually Hugh Freeze is going to see what we do, what I thought from day one, which is that they need to start Robbie Ashford specifically in this game.
He knows that he gives them the better chance to win this. Hugh Freeze has said at one point, I was one of the best play callers in the sport. I'm not that anymore. That's why, he's going to share the duties with Philip Montgomery, all those things. He sees what we see. It's not that. It's just not. I will continue to say it is trying to show that we are going to throw the forward pass because in the year of our Lord 2023, we must show the world that we can throw a forward pass, or else it's really hard to recruit guys who throw and catch a forward pass. That's what this comes down to.
Listen, buddy, if LSU can't stop you from throwing a forward pass, you need to just try something else.
154 passing yards, all right? Look, it was an offensive blitzkrieg. That's what it was.
That was the best he'll ever do. This is going to be an insane pick, but I'm going to do it. I think Robbie plays a ton, and I think Auburn wins this game. I think they already have. I think this game plan is so easy to see. It's like you do the thing where you pretend like Peyton Thorne is the starter. And I don't know why they keep doing it. We've seen it over and over and over again. The Georgia game probably, we'll see, because he had that weird long run at the beginning that kind of set them up for success. But we've seen it over and over and over again where the Peyton Thorne thing just doesn't work. And then Ashford comes in to save a team. And we talked about this with Mullen and Anthony Richardson, where it's so hard to get a guy who doesn't prepare as a starter, plays a completely different style. You game plan this way, and you're just all right, now we're just going to play basketball. Now we're just going to play the flute. It's going to be a completely different thing that we're doing here. I think that hopefully this is the week where they figure this out, but it's on the plains. We've already seen them hang with Georgia. I think that after this LSU game that I just witnessed in person, Hugh Freeze has got to try something new. And I think this is finally the week where he's just dude, the passing thing isn't going to happen for us this year because, like you said, when they did that last year, they got significantly better. So I think that the writing is on the wall that like they can beat this Ole Miss team. Like we've talked about it, LSU gave them a gift of winning that game. They don't beat teams like that. That one was at home. This is on the road in the Plains. And yeah, man, I feel like there's going to be one of these games that traps Ole Miss, and this feels like it could be it. Before we talk about serious stuff, I got to tell you about one of the funniest, like not bad friend, but just like weird energy moves one of my friends did at the game. So one of my friends, my friend Colin, was explaining to my friend Charlie, hey, you can do daily fantasy for like college sports or whatever because like betting is legal in Louisiana. I was like, okay, cool. So Charlie does this lineup, doesn't really tell us about it. Walks back in like a couple hours later. He's like, all right, guys, check it out. Quarterback, Peyton Thorne.
Buddy. Who wants to tell him?
We all were like, not only is that like kind of a bad friend move because we're all going to the LSU game together, but we were all just like, you picked the wrong quarterback on all.
Okay, but he's and daily fantasy, like a lot of times, you know, the prices and the way that it works out.
It was a cheap play. Yeah.
So it was a cheap play. You're also sitting with the Auburn section though. So it's a vibes move more than anything else. It's a macro vibes move, not a micro vibes move, because obviously you're going with LSU fans, but still it's like, I don't know.
You're hedging yourself because if Auburn wins, then he's looking at all the Auburn fans. I picked Peyton Thorne. I hate that.
He's high-fiving.
You're giving him crap all day. Yes. I was like, are you serious, dog?
I kind of respect it, actually. That's not the worst thing I've ever heard. Yeah, look, I think that crowd's going to be awesome. This game at night, there's a part of me that's wondering, man, is this the type of game where Auburn's defense just really flexes its muscles? Shameless plug. The Dudes Who Deserve Better column, that is out by the time that people are listening to this. Let's just say I've got 2 Auburn defensive players. You could probably guess which guys they are. Oh, I'll just say it. It's Jalen Simpson. It's Eugene Asante. Like, those guys are both on the Dudes Who Deserve Better column. This is a game in which we could see that group really get the respect that they deserve, because I think they've been good this year. I know they didn't have a good week against LSU. You know who has had a good week against LSU? Basically nobody. FSU and the final 20 minutes of that game. Like that. Other than that, that's pretty much it. So I'll let them off the hook a little bit for that. But I think Auburn could have a big game. Alternatively, this is a reminder that this team is still just such a mess to watch offensively. And Auburn fans, just kind of close your eyes and wait until this identity is actually established in year 2. Lock of the week, Will. Thank you, UNC. Thank you, Chiswick. We are over 500. Some said it couldn't be done. It has been done. 4-3 on the year after an 0-2 start. 4-1 since then. And the only loss was the last-minute Notre Dame drive against Duke. So feeling pretty good. We're in a good place. Making you a little bit of money, hopefully. My focus has been, do not overthink this. So this is my mindset this week as well. Trust what your eyes tell you. Don't get sucked into games that are being played on paper and be like, oh, this defensive line should be able to feast against that offensive line. Sometimes things like that matter. Sometimes they don't. That's why I'm going with Ohio State to cover -4 at home against Penn State. My belief is that James Franklin is a good, not great coach. If I were a Penn State fan, which I have a couple of my poker buddies are big Penn State fans, I think I would pull my hair out with some of these James Franklin moments, especially big time games down to the wire. If I hear one more time someone say, oh, you know, Penn State plays Ohio State really well, I'm going to lose my freaking mind. I'm going to lose my mind. You know who plays Penn State well? Ohio State. Everybody. Because not everybody. Not everybody. Number 16.
I mean, outside of this year, like they find a way anyway.
Yeah.
Historically.
Ohio State has won 10 of 11 in this game. They only lost game because of a wild block field goal and return. That was literally the ball bouncing the exact way that Penn State needed it to bounce. And I get it. Ohio State was losing this game last year. JT, going to crush the pronunciation of this, Tui Moloau.
Let's go.
He completely took over this game. He was awesome. But James Franklin in a big-time road game. This is where I'm telling myself, don't overthink this, Connor. No. Don't trust that. Against Ohio State and Michigan on the road, he is a combined 1-8. The only win that he has against those two teams on the road, he won at the Big House during the COVID season. Big House was empty. Michigan was a joke that year. Congratulations. history tells us that even if this game is close, James Franklin's going to probably run the ball on 4th and 7. He's going to kick a field goal on 4th and 1 from the 10-yard line to make a 13-point game, a 10-point game. He's going to do something stupid. Buckeyes -4.
Yeah, I am with you. I think that Penn State is just kind of a team that only exists. Like if it was scripted and a conspiracy actually exists where like the Big Ten regents get together and they're just like, okay, Penn State, we need you to beat everybody but Michigan and Ohio State.
Yes.
They literally exist to be that team. Like say what you will about the SEC, but that 3rd and 4th team actually can win the national championship some years in the SEC. And even like Tennessee last year will just come out of nowhere. It's like this team only exists to have strength of schedule strengthening for those two teams. I'm 100% with you. I think this is going to be like the worst QB matchup we've seen in this matchup in a minute. And then also I'd like to say that like that team too, I mean like Trace McSorley's not walking through that door. Like they had some talent. They had the great Joe Moorhead. Like they had such a freakish team that year that was so not Penn State. Like it was a team that took a bunch of risks. It was a team that had Barkley who him and Brock Bowers, I would have just put them in a cage match to see who wins. But like,
I'd watch
like
that.
win healthy. That would be so fire. But yeah, it's like they just get them to do like a decathlon. But yeah, it's like they like they just had this insane team that year that they like beat Ohio State on exactly what you just said. So yeah, I'm with you.
You know what's sad, Will, is you brought up Trace McSorley, and I saw that the Bears added him to the practice squad, and I thought maybe Trace McSorley got some juice, Justin Fields, dislocated thumb, just maybe. Can't rule it out. Love me some Trace McSorley. Love that James Franklin took the ball out of his hands like 3 different times during that 2018 season and cost him like 3 different games. The receivers weren't good enough, according to James Franklin.
Okay. Anyway.
All right. Let's kick it to Alyssa Lang. Little peel behind the onion. We recorded on Tuesday, and immediately after the interview, I checked Twitter and I see the Beamer foot thing. So that's why it wasn't discussed with Alyssa, but a lot of Florida, South Carolina, and Mizzou talk in there. So here's Alyssa. Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Alyssa Lang. Alyssa, we always have to talk about food in some way, shape, or form. This isn't so much a question. I just wanted to congratulate you on eating on camera and once again not becoming a meme, because actually you didn't eat on camera. You turned away.
Yeah, there was no chance that I was going to eat a hot dog normally, if you will, on camera for the world to see, because we know how evil the internet can be these days. So yeah, I had to go back to my banana eating tactics from 2021, I think that was. Ate the banana like the rib. You know, I considered eating the hot dog kind of from the middle as well, but I was like, that's just wrong. I just can't do that. So had to turn around, take a bite of the hot dog, and then I always underestimate how difficult it is to hold the clipboard, the microphone, the hot dog, and then try to give an immediate reaction on the food when my mouth is full. I get very overstimulated, so I actually haven't gone back and watched that clip, nor do I plan on it, because I don't think it looked very good for me.
No, I think you were good. I don't think people realize how hard that is. It is a really difficult thing to do with all the stuff that you're holding on to, and you need to for the sake of content. That people have to know how a donut hot dog tastes, because if we don't, then what are we doing in the midst of a game here? I don't need sideline reports and stuff like that. Just give me the food content.
You know, when the state fair is happening literally 100 yards away from the outside of the stadium, I feel like the donut hot dog was a necessary evil for that game. I'm not sure I would eat a donut hot dog again, which is actually very interesting given that I love donuts and I love hot dogs. But to put them together, I think the problem was I needed a fresh one, and the great folks over the state fair, they were wonderful in bringing that food over to us. The problem is with me being on the sideline, that hot dog had been sitting out since the end of the first quarter and was a little bit cold at this point, maybe a little bit soggy compared to the guys up in the booth who I think could put theirs in a refrigerator or pop it in a microwave or something. So I think that changed the food eating experience for me a little bit, but it was still, fair food, which means it's 10 out of 10, right?
It's what I always wonder about with Top Chef, Great British Baking Show, these shows where they're judging food and there's no way they're being served at the temperature that they're supposed to be served at. So how do you really get a good accurate take? You kind of just have to like throw that out the window. That seems impossible to me. I don't know.
I watch Chopped all the time, and it's Chopped, Beat Bobby Flay. These shows are always on in our house. I get more agitated at just the preferences of the judges because sometimes there will be a meal. I'm like, that sounds great. Check all 3 things off the list. These are my favorite, salty, sweet, whatever it is. But then you'll get this judge who's like, well, I don't like jalapenos, so it's a 1 out of 10 for me. Hold on a second. Hold on. It's not about you. It's about, is the food good? And the subjectiveness of some of those shows really agitates me, as you can tell.
Yeah, I agree. I don't need Paul Hollywood telling me about certain foods he doesn't like, and then you have to impress him and like try and win him over with that. No, I'm not. I'm not buying that at all. Non-food related things. How many Gator chomps did you have to do because you lost your bet to Doring, and how directly responsible was I for that?
That you were 100% responsible for it, first of all.
Yep.
And you know what? I took the bet because the other side of it was much worse. Like, if South Carolina had won and Doring had to pay up, doing a cockadoodle-doo at the end of every sentence would have been way more embarrassing than me just having to Gator chomp for the entirety of a segment. So that I'm a little appreciative of you for. I don't know what the final count was on Gator chomps. I thought I did a pretty good job in not only trying to give some analysis while doing it. That was actually pretty difficult to do. Focus on the Gator chomp, not hit the microphone that is right there next to you, and try to remember some of the points that I was trying to make. And then you've got Burns in there trying to weasel his way into making it worse for me. We go to break and he's like, I think you need to do it in the next segment too. I said, I only agreed to 1 segment. And you did get a shout out at the beginning when Doring and I were trying to talk through the bet. We did say that Connor O'Gara came up with the, with what was at stake. So thank you, but no thank you for that.
Yeah, apologies. I did legitimately think about it when I was like, all right, they're definitely going to ask me about a bet when I went on SEC this morning. What was it, like Thursday last week or something like that? And we settled on that. And I thought, I actually thought about it at the end of the game too, as it was seemingly going to be up in the air. It could go any direction. You had a front row seat for what felt like a really important moment for Billy Napier. And I noticed afterwards, he's not that rah-rah guy. Like, that's just not his personality, but he looks more fired up than any time that I've ever seen him coming off a win. What sense did you get from him talking to him in the postgame?
Going back to last season and having some Florida games, you could tell that there was a lot of work to be done. Whether Coach Napier said it outright or whether he would tell stories or kind of give us context clues as to what was going on in the building. And it's not to say that I don't think that he liked his 2022 team. I think he obviously liked parts of it, but I think he really likes this team. And that was apparent when we were in our Friday meetings and he was talking about the conversations that he's had with some of the leaders on this team as he's talking about what practices looked like over the last few weeks leading up to South Carolina. You just got this sense that he felt like things were starting to click into place. Then we get to game day, and I was very mindful of the energy. A lot of people in Gainesville and around the program were talking about maybe the lack of energy that we saw from Florida early in the season and how much that's changed. So it maybe sounds like a simple thing, but that was something that I was really trying to watch the faces of the guys. What are the interactions that they're having with each other? And I saw a very energized football team that seemed to be on the same page with the mission in front of them. When I was walking with Billy Napier after halftime, we'll do a little walk and talk, and then I'll give a report based off of what he told me. My go-to is usually, what did you do at halftime? Who did you talk to? What did you emphasize? And of course, he goes over some X's and O's, some things we need to do better, mental mistakes that we had on defense, some self-inflicted wounds that if we could have this back, we were in a different situation. But then he stopped and he said, the attitude in that locker room was great. The energy in that locker room was great. I don't know that I've ever had a coach talk about that part of halftime to me. Normally it's, we got to hit this pass, we got to hit the deep ball, we got to get the run game going, whatever it is. But he made a point to say that. And then he kind of gestured over to his team and he was like, these guys fight. These guys are a bunch of fighters and they want to be out here and they want to win this football game. And after a first half of feeling like Florida just didn't really have a ton of momentum, even though they were very much in the game, it just didn't really feel like they had a great amount of momentum. We obviously see that then build in the second half. So I think Billy Napier's reaction to winning that game, and you mentioned how fired up he was in the post-game interview, I almost got a sense of, okay, I read this team right, the energy was there, and it worked. And now we're building something, and now we'll be able to take this forward. And I can point to everything these guys did and say, it worked. That was how I kind of interpreted how happy he was. And it was really cool to watch him in that moment, knowing that we've struggled on the road, knowing that we've had all these issues, to be able to say, it's moving in the right direction. It might go slow, it might take time, but it's moving, was huge for him.
It's a great observation because it's probably something that we don't talk about enough. Does a coach like their team? And we could listen to all the cliche things that they say at a press conference, but I think there are some coaches that over the course of the year, they just grow really frustrated with their team. I think Mark Stoops is dealing with some of that right now with Kentucky. If you've seen, I mean, some of his comments that have come out, you're just like, I don't really know, even dating back to some of the things he was saying about them in spring and the way that they would come out and practice. I don't think that he particularly likes this team that much. And I kind of wonder about that now with South Carolina because Shane Beamer's post-game press conference, it made the rounds. And I thought he was about to drop an F-bomb with you when he said during the game, do your freaking job. And he gets animated, obviously, but that was about as close to losing it as I've seen him in a moment where he's usually pretty composed. What was the mood on that South Carolina sideline after yet another loss?
Yeah, it was kind of a roller coaster throughout the entirety of the game. I thought the South Carolina sideline was really energized for the first 3.5 quarters of that football game. Obviously, issues defensively that I think going into that game we expected. And that's the thing about South Carolina. You mentioned Shane's post-game press conference. I see a lot of people getting riled up about some of the things that he said, and I don't really understand it because it's like he's not giving you coach speak. He's listing off everything that went wrong and everything that's got to get better. I don't know what else you want him to do. Like that first quarter interview that we had, that's what you want. You're not just getting a throwaway answer. You're seeing the passion, you're seeing the fire of this head coach. And that really does trickle down to this football team. I think offensively, everything they did on Saturday was really promising for the rest of the season. Moving around the entire offensive line going into week 7, that's not something that often works or works well at this level. We saw Arkansas do it a few weeks ago, and by halftime, Sam Pittman's like, nope, we're going back to the original starting 5 from the first 5 games of the season because it's just not working. That O-line helped Spencer Rattler, protected Spencer Rattler. They had big plays, made big explosives. The run game was there at times with Mario Anderson hurdling this guy, and everything that the offense did energized this team. It just felt like once again the defense was on its heels, and there's been too much of that this season for this team, I think, to be able to take a breath at any point during a football game. And I think some of that just is what it is in 2023, right? Like you talk about the pulse of your team or liking your team. Not to say that Shane Beamer doesn't like this team, because I don't think that's true. But I think there's an understanding of the lack of depth, especially on the defensive side of the football. If somebody's got to come out, if one of the starting 11 has to come out, it's pretty likely that a true freshman who has not had a ton of reps in SEC play is going to come in his place. When you've got a receiver with the talent of Ricky Pearsall, Trey Wilson, those 2 running backs that Florida brings to Columbia, it's actually pretty impressive that this was a shootout all the way to the end, that both teams were in it, given some of the depth problems that South Carolina has. So all that to say, I think South Carolina is a team that I didn't find that they were deterred. I didn't find that they were checked out. I never felt like the momentum wasn't there for them offensively. I think defensively, it's just guys continuing to learn on the fly. And this is a really dangerous league to do that in. It's going to be difficult for them the remainder of the season, but they still have a lot to play for, and they understand that as well.
Yeah, both of us are old enough to remember a time when South Carolina just had dudes in that defensive backfield, and you didn't really have to worry about that as much. And even as recently as Cam Smith, having a guy that can just be your lockdown I'm going to go take care of this guy. I'm going to eliminate him from this game plan. And they clearly don't have that this year. Like even last year,
when you have Nicky Manwari, your starting safety trying to play man to man on Ricky Pearsall, like that's just a bad matchup. It's just not a good matchup. There's not a Cam Smith on this team.
Yeah, that's just not what he does. That's not what he does. Nicky Manwari does many things well. Member of the All Bang the Drum team, but like covering that guy in space, forget about it. It's just not going to happen. It even speaks to last year, the lack of depth that they had, where he comes into the game because starter goes down, and then boom, you've got a true freshman that's playing as many snaps as anyone on that defense. I think that there are a lot of people wondering what Beamer's perspective is if he fully understands how fleeting success can be because of his dad and who he was and all those things. And I like, that's not my question at all, because the time that I've spent around him, I'm sure the time that you spent around him, he gets it from that perspective. And I didn't get the sense this offseason that he was overconfident coming off of the way that they finished last year at all. And he talks about momentum. Like momentum is there from a booster support perspective. That's entirely different from saying you have season to season momentum. And just because you finish this way, it means you're going to start another way. Like I keep thinking about though, how much does it suck for South Carolina knowing that Spencer Rattler is playing at such a high level? And this is the byproduct of that. Like if you had told any South Carolina fan, Spencer Rattler is going to play at an all SEC level, which I think there's a good case to be made for that so far, and this is going to be the first half, I think everybody would have been sick to their stomach.
Yeah, it's been tough, and all the credit in the world to Spencer, a kid that you never once hear say, well, if the O-line protected a little bit better, or maybe if I didn't have to take 6 sacks in the North Carolina game. I have so much respect for the quarterback and the person that Spencer Rattler has matured into in his time, not only just at South Carolina, but over his collegiate career. He is someone who shoulders more blame than necessary, is constantly rallying the troops. And for him to lose Juice Wells as early in the season on top of some of the O-line issues, he has every reason in the world to complain every single day. But you talk to Coach Beamer, you talk to Dowell Loggins, and it's the complete and total opposite. For example, one of the stories that they told us on Friday during meetings when I was just saying, well, Spencer in 2022 versus Spencer in 2023, what are the big differences? Because when I was on the phone with Spencer last week, he's like, people want to say that something changed, like a switch flipped, and now I'm this different quarterback. I'm the same guy. I'm just more comfortable. And maybe the way our offense is being run this year, we've got talented players put in better position to find success for this team. He doesn't feel like there's been this night and day change. But something that Dowell Loggins mentioned was, building on the Xavier Legette relationship. When it became clear that Legette was going to be this go-to, Spencer's always over there talking to 17. Hey, you're the hot hand. I'm going to feed you. If it's not Legette, if it's somebody else, Nick Harbor, for example, has a big explosive catch early in the first half against Florida. He's constantly going over to those young players, coaching them up, or making sure that they're getting that positive reinforcement when things are going well. Hey, I'm going to keep finding you. You might be third in my progression, but I'm going to get to you. Do not stop on your route, because if the play breaks down and I find open space, if you find open space, I'm coming to you. So watching him on the sidelines after them telling us that on Friday could not be more true. At one point, Xavier Legette gets a little bit dinged up. When he's done with the trainer and comes walking back over to the bench, Spencer's the first person right next to him, making sure he's good to go, making sure that they're still on the same page. He missed the last few plays. Let's get back right. Let's do what we need to do. So I think, as heartbreaking maybe as it is for South Carolina fans to watch what Spencer's been doing, back to your original point, and maybe not having the success at 2-4 at this point that you would have thought that numbers like that would give you, I think Spencer's still proving a huge point for his own career moving forward. And I would hope is soaring up the NFL quarterback draft boards just based off of what he's done this season.
Yeah, I mean, you telling Trev, like, hey, next mock draft, Spencer Rattler's got to be in there. we got to make sure that happens.
That's what he says. Him and Xavier Legette have equally helped each other really fly up the draft boards as far as there's always like that one guy that the draft community is not talking about at the beginning of the season that 4 or 5 weeks in, you're going, who's the Xavier Legette kid who's been around for years at South Carolina and at one point is leading the country in receiving yards. I mean, it's the bright side of some very dark areas, I guess, for this South Carolina offense so far.
You'll be at South Carolina Mizzou this weekend. Is Drink your coach of the year right now in the SEC?
It's hard to argue against Drink. When we were on our SiriusXM show last week after the Missouri LSU game, and had Missouri won that game, obviously it's like scream Drink's name through the rooftops, off the rooftops. I think Nick Saban is up in that conversation for me as well, and that might sound like a throwaway, but especially after the Texas A&M game, I think Nick Saban maybe has done his best coaching job, or one of his best coaching jobs that we've seen in Tuscaloosa. Maybe he doesn't necessarily have the athletes that have been on these previous national championship teams, but how many of us were counting Alabama out of the race by 3 weeks into the season? You look back at that USF game, and I'm of the belief that if the USF game is not on the schedule, we don't even have that conversation about the dynasty being dead and Bama being done and all of that. Nick Saban has proven that he's still a GOAT. He's still one of the best coaches in college football, and he's doing that with a different team than he's had in years past. So I think that he's got to be in that conversation. But what Eli Drinkwitz has done has been really impressive. And when I look at Missouri's schedule for the remainder of the season, they got to go to Athens, but the rest of their SEC East opponents have to go to Como. And it's not crazy to think that until that Georgia-Missouri game, the road through the East for everybody below Georgia goes through Columbia, Missouri. I know Tennessee fans are screaming, hearing that, knowing how well they've been playing right now. And if Tennessee goes to Como and beats Missouri, I'll be singing a different tune. But you can't argue with the talent that Drink has brought, but also kept in Como. When you look at the development of Luther Burden and that story that's been talked about so much throughout the course of the season. And the thing that impressed me the most about Missouri last weekend in the win over Kentucky was Burden wasn't really out there. Burden wasn't really a mega factor in winning that football game. The pieces around Burden stepped up, and they still beat Kentucky by double digits. That's the make of a championship team. That's the make of a team that's going to upset some people down the course of the season. It can't just be that one guy, and Missouri's proven that they have multiple dudes.
Yeah, and I think the move to be able to replace their most productive player last year in Dom Lovett, and then say, all right, that means we're going to put Luther Burden in the slot. This is how we're going to run this offense. I'm going to bring in my own play caller and finally make that move. And this is what the byproduct is. I absolutely think that he'd be the leader in the clubhouse right now. What's your early sense on this game? Because it feels like Mizzou, as good as that defense has been for the majority of the year and coming off a really impressive effort at Kentucky, they still struggled against the only like real stud quarterback that they faced. And I think that you have to include Spencer Rattler in that category of really, really good quarterback that can beat you. What sense do you kind of get from this matchup, especially knowing how maddening this game has been for South Carolina fans because they haven't won it in 5 years?
Yeah, Drink has gotten the better of Shane Beamer since the time that they've both been there. So that's been an interesting little wrinkle to the rivalry. I know these teams do not like each other. We haven't talked to either staff yet as far as what the game plan or what the focus looks like this weekend. But I look at Missouri's offense and I look at South Carolina's offense, and I see some similarities there as far as game breakers, skill position players who can change the course of a game. A quarterback who's not only afraid to throw the deep ball, but is throwing extremely accurately and on time, finding the hot hand in both Brady Cook and Spencer Rattler. And for me, because of that, it comes down to defense. And what we've seen from Missouri, I think, is better and better every week. Maybe we want to take the LSU game out of the equation in that one just because no one can stop LSU's offense at this point. So I feel like they almost don't even count against you as a top to bottom defense. Chris Abrams' drain is top 5 in the SEC when it comes to interceptions so far on the season. When I look at some of the grades from Pro Football Focus, a couple weeks ago, he was grading out to be one of the highest corners in the SEC, if not the highest in the SEC, with all of the intangibles and measurables that they put into those grades. So I think Abrams' drain has been a player that's really flown under the radar. I get concerned for South Carolina's defense again for the same reason that we were concerned against Florida, and what ended up biting them in the butt against Florida is the opposing offense's ability to throw the deep ball, to generate explosive 15-plus yard pass plays, which Missouri has been doing ever since K-State. That was the big knock on Brady Cook. Can he throw the deep ball? Can he do it accurately? He's been doing it. And like we said, it's not just Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Mookie Cooper. I mean, they have multiple guys who are going to be open. It's not just Ricky Pearsall. It's not Eugene Wilson. I would argue that maybe Missouri has more talented pass catchers than Florida did a week ago. So I think South Carolina's secondary is going to be tested. They're going to be tested early. They're going to be tested often. And that's where I would say the defense is going to have to generate some points. They're going to have to come up with some turnovers because Missouri is too explosive of an offense. And I think the defensive competition, if you will, the defensive comparison between these two teams, Missouri's just a little bit more proven at this point. So I'm interested to see what kind of game plan Clayton White rolls out to maybe make Brady Cook's day a little bit more difficult. But as we've seen from Brady Cook, he can take some shots and he gets up like nothing happened either. So it'll be a very interesting game. If Missouri's not taking South Carolina seriously, we know that crazier things have happened in the SEC East, but it is homecoming in Como. So you have to imagine that stadium's going to be rocking. They're going to be excited. They're going to want to get 4 straight over South Carolina in the drink era. So it could have the makings of maybe a similar game as we saw to Florida.
Okay, let's get the teaser here, because I'm assuming with Brady Cook in this game, you're going to have some sort of food reference worked in on the sideline. I'm ready for that. What's in the works? Because if you don't have anything, I might have a suggestion for you.
Okay, so we don't have anything, but I will say when we were there for K-State, we went to Bud's Barbecue in downtown Columbia, Missouri, and it was incredible. It's where Coach Drink does his call-in show every single week. And I had pork belly burnt ends that were some of the most amazing things I've ever had in my life. So maybe I can work that into the sidelines selfishly because I want more pork belly burnt ends.
I think literally cooking on the sideline would be great. And maybe you wait and see, you get a portable grill, whip up some hot dogs. If it's a blowout, we can get Brady Cook. Yeah, let Brady cook on the sideline. I don't know how disrespectful that is.
It's so funny. It's so funny because we led a couple weeks ago. I was adamant. I was like, I think it was after Brady Cook broke the SEC passing record against Vanderbilt a few weeks ago. I was like, we're leading the show with Brady Cook on Out of Pocket on Wednesday. And we came into the set and I'm going like this, like, let Brady cook. And then a week later, somebody was in my mentions, a Missouri fan, just talking about how Missouri gets no respect and no love. And I'm like, we led the show with Brady Cook on purpose for this reason. I'm the biggest Brady Cook fan there is.
Mizzou fans don't know what to do with their hands right now because they're so used to the disrespect that they have to turn this into a thing. And look, there are places where you. Yeah, that is not the place to go barking for attention. Trust me, if you want to, there are other places that who exactly I'm talking about where you're like, all right, we're not getting love that we should, but Mizzou has definitely been worthy of that, and they've gotten a lot, I think, on SEC specific airwaves especially. Did you get the fire extinguisher treatment when you were at Ole Miss a couple weeks ago? Did you avoid that?
I don't think I was on their sidelines when they were doing it, actually. I'm always ready for it. I'm always conscious that it could be happening, but I want to say I was on Arkansas sidelines when that happened. I was also trying to steer clear of Lane Kiffin outside of our interviews because he wasn't really happy to talk to me that day. Things weren't really going well for Ole Miss offensively that day.
Is Lane ever happy to talk to anyone? That's the real question.
On Friday in our meetings, he's great. We had a great conversation, and it was funny. The amount of texts that I got after our halftime interview. Did you piss off Kiffin? What did you say to Kiffin? I'm like, no. It's not personal. I just don't think he's happy because this isn't the Ole Miss offense that he's, 1, become accustomed to, or 2, wanted to see against Arkansas. So I think it was the course of the game that probably ruffled his feathers a little bit.
Ole Miss was hungover. Lane looked like somebody that was dealing with a hangover. He kind of embodied it. And look, I'm not like poking shots at Lane or anything that he's got going on in his personal life, but that looked like a team that was dealing with a hangover. Clearly, when he was approaching you on the sidelines, he was not like, when you're hungover, you're not putting a smile on your face. It's everything is pass fail at this point. Just tell me where I need to be, when I need to be there. I'm going to get through this. And Lane got through it. Speaking of that, what's your, and maybe this is it, what's your least favorite in-game interview that you've had over the years? Maybe you can make it specific to SEC Network.
That's a really good question. Least favorite. Well, I did. It can at least favorite interview be an interview that didn't happen, because last year during basketball season, I was on the call for a Kentucky Vandy game. And it was around the time where Kentucky had been struggling a little bit, but I think they took like an 8 or 10 point lead into halftime against Vanderbilt. And I was in position, ready to grab Coach Calipari. And he just, I don't know if he was in the zone, if he saw me, and he decided, nope, don't want to do that interview. He just kind of blew right by me and went into the locker room, and I reached out. I kind of tried to like grab his shoulder. Coach, we're supposed to do this interview. Nope, was not happening, was not going to happen. The Kentucky fans who were in the arena were like, what happened? Like, we saw you try to stop him. What happened? And I just kind of was standing there. I felt like I got stood up. I felt like I was sitting at a restaurant, just kind of like, all right, is everyone looking at me and they know what happened? This guy didn't show up. Like, should I just leave now? And so I just kind of walked back to my seat, like knowing that this arena full of people saw him just walk past me. So that one was an interesting least favorite interview that did not happen. But I can't think of an interview that I've had that's been bad per se. You obviously will have some where coaches are really fired up and they're really angry, and maybe it seems like they're yelling at you, but they're not. They're upset at their team more than likely, and I prefer an interview like that. Like going back to Lane, if we love the honesty from Shane Beamer, I love the honesty from Lane Kiffin too, to sit there and go, well, I'm sure you can figure out what happened to Jackson Dart. He's not playing well. Got to hit some of these passes. Like, I'd rather that than coach speak 10 times out of 10. So you can yell at me all you want if that's the kind of answer we're going to get. But thankfully our coaches in the SEC for the most part are really, really gracious and really great about kind of getting in TV mode. So it's probably a good thing that I don't have a terrible interview that comes to mind.
Last one for you. How close are you to being able to out deadlift Takeo? Because he says he doesn't lift heavy anymore. So I don't know if he's done that in a minute. He's looking a little bit smaller. The neck is going down. It would be great out of pocket content to have a deadlift contest, maybe with a couple of parameters in place. But I'm just saying, like, he might be dialing it back. You might be able to take him.
Those are fighting words, first of all. Second of all, I will say a few weeks ago on one of our shows, it might have been SEC This Morning, Peter and Doring ran a promo for Out of Pocket, and they did have a discussion over who was more in shape, Spikes or me. And I think they both said me, which I was like, guys, I'm doing something right if I've lied to you this much to think that I'm in better shape than Takeo freaking Spikes. Are you kidding me? So the deadlift, fun fact, actually, I'm in the middle of a transition going back to more Olympic weightlifting, barbell lifting, things like that. I'm getting back into sort of the CrossFit space, if you will, like as we speak this week. So I'm very excited about that. I haven't actually deadlifted in probably over a year, so it's probably not good. But check back with me in 6 months and we'll see where we're at.
If CD and PB had said that Takeo was in better shape than you, they get canceled in 2 seconds. So that would not have played well. Yeah. No,
I would lead the charge as well. Yeah. And I love to hang it over PB and Dari's head. I think to this point, I'm the only host who has gone to CD's gym with him down in Gainesville, completed a full workout with Chris Doring and his trainer. And it was funny because this is how I know CD is my guy. We walk into the gym and I'm kind of small. A lot of people say I'm shorter than in person than they would have expected on TV. And so I've always been smaller than a lot of my friends, and I've hated it, but it's okay. And I remember walking into the gym and we were doing sled pushes, and the trainer was like, well, why don't you just do the sled and then we can put some weight on it based off of, how you do it just as. And Doring cuts him off. He's like, hell no, she can put 245s on there. She'll be fine. And his trainer's like, hey man, like I really don't need her to get hurt on my watch. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'll do whatever. And so I go in there with the sled and it's empty, and I just kind of put one hand up and start pushing with one hand. His trainer was like, oh, okay, all right, you're kind of like a low key, like can't tell, but we could tell. And so Doring starts stacking plates up there until it actually got hard. But I appreciated him coming to my defense that I could actually push a sled with some weight on it.
That's a hard-o move to go in there and just say one hand, I got this. No big deal.
I was like, yeah, if I've got to prove it physically, I can do that. I was never a big smack talker vocally when I ran track or played soccer or anything in sports. But if you talked to me or talked at me, it was just, I just kept it up here. And then when we hit the field or we hit the track, whatever it was, then I was ready. I was ready to prove it wrong.
Oh God, that's great. That'd be awesome. I need that video. I need that video instead of next time CD with more of his shirtless Instagram stories. That guy.
It's too much.
It's too much. It's like, man, you're on the other side of 50 now. I don't know. Don't get it twisted. I respect the crap out of it, but like we're getting him daily now at this point.
He's only getting more bold as he's gotten on the other side of 50. It's only more bold.
He wears less and less clothes every time I see him.
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
I try. For everyone out there listening, I try my hardest to keep the man in line, and no one can do it. No one can.
Tough thing to do. Alyssa, this has been great. Really appreciate the time. Safe travels this weekend. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me.
All right, lad of the week. You want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So my lad of the week was Mizzou punter Luke Bauer. Now, this is a guy who swung what could be Mizzou's season in this game against Kentucky, right? They're down 14-0. Nothing is working for them. They go out to punt. And to understand how insane this moment actually was, if you guys that don't know what happened, this is going to be even more of a roller coaster. This is a guy who is a preferred walk-on, did not get recruited, is from the Smith. He basically is just the most random member of Mizzou's roster that plays, that actually has a crucial role in this team. And don't you know it, in this game that could really determine if Mizzou's season starts to get away from him, they call a fake punt. And this dude stands in there and delivers a pass that if Brady Cook had thrown it to Luther Burden, they might have won the LSU game at the end of it. He executes one of the best fake punts I've ever seen. This guy's like 19 years old. It was a dime ski. And I went there and like looked at his backup because I'm like, okay, like this guy, like what did this Met? There's like kind of a powerhouse in Missouri. Like, did he like play another position? Like, of course he played another position. Kicker, not quarterback. Does not have any, like no logical bone in his body. He says, I'm Peyton Manning for 5 seconds. So anyway, he hits a not a special teamer, but like a receiver, a guy with some great hands. It was definitely a 2-man play because it was a contested catch. But dude, not only catches the first down, but runs it all the way in, and it is just the most electric play imaginable in that situation. A call that would have just been so classic drink if it didn't go well, because you're punting when you're down already. If you screw that up, it's just such an obvious like other team has the juice, they go and score. This one's like knife motion. It's 21-0. And this dude just knows like, this is my moment. This is my 8 Mile. I'm going to go in here and just like completely delivers like this masterful, like he's going to have a place in Mizzou history, like no matter what. And he's a guy, like I said, not a super high recruit, not like his heralded guy. Like it was kind of a shocker, like when he won the job in the offseason, and he was a kicker like in high school as well. So it's not like he was like this like punter stud that they were all just like jazzed about, but just want to give him some love because that's like what we talk about with Lad of the Week. It's like, hey, it's about, putting in the work. It's about waiting for your turn. And that dude in his moment was just like, this is my moment. All you guys got a front row seat to this.
Think about this. How many punters in the history of organized football have taken the soul out of a visiting stadium for a good reason? Think about that. That is really hard to do. To have the game-changing play in that game, to be able to step up in that moment. Because usually You're not doing that because coaches aren't trusting you to be able to come up with a fake punt in that spot anyways. So you're not really being called upon to kind of dig them out of a rough spot early or something like that. I guess you can make the argument that's kind of the perfect time to call a fake punt. But think about how difficult that is to do. You can coffin corner the best punt of your life, and still the stadium is going to be like, all right, yeah, but we take over on offense. So yeah, cool.
Right.
Whatever. Or like, even if you run for a first down or something like that, it's like, oh, that's a bummer. Defense has to stay on the field. To throw a touchdown pass and to throw a dime the way that he did, that was stuff that punters from coast to coast, I hope we're talking about, being like, Luke Bauer, man, he was 9th in Marler's quarterback power rankings in the SEC. I said to Marler, you should have had him at 6.
That for a play, dude, I'm taking that guy. Like, if we're ever playing Pong later in life and he's a celebrity shot, that's the guy. That guy is ice in his veins.
Few SEC quarterbacks have not had a throw as good as Luke Bauer this season, if you know what I mean. Not to name names or anything, but yeah, worth keeping in mind. My lad of the week. Talk about staying ready. This guy, the epitome of it. Tez Walker, the UNC receiver. This is playing out in such a unique way. If you recall, if you stay up to date on this stuff, you know exactly what I'm going to talk about. Tez Walker was told by the NCAA, hey, we don't care that you didn't play a down of football at NC Central in 2020. You still transferred twice. You can't play at UNC this year. And then don't you know what the NCAA is like, hey, maybe you do actually deserve to play upon further examination. Basically, everybody's mocking us. We don't have any perspective whatsoever. We don't really have much of a choice. We're just going to let you play. I think they were going to take legal action too. There's a lot of stuff involved there. You've probably seen the video of Mac Brown telling him that he was eligible. Quiet game against Syracuse in his debut, and then boom, second game he plays, he goes off against Miami. He's like, wait a minute, I heard that Connor had UNC as his lock of the week. I got to do right by that guy. And boy, did he. 151 scrimmage yards, 3 touchdowns. Such a great moment for that kid. Andrea Adelson wrote about this for ESPN.com. And if you don't know kind of his backstory, like he became the primary caregiver for his grandma back in high school because his mom was working multiple jobs. He's from Charlotte, about 2.5 hours from Chapel Hill, much closer than the 7 hours that he would have had to drive to be able to go to and fro when he was at Kent State. His grandma couldn't travel to games there, couldn't just pop home on weekends, like during the offseason, do that stuff. But basically, the NCAA was dismissing how Walker had sought mental help while at Kent State. And then again, when he transferred to UNC, and they were like, hey, you just left because your coach did. Sean Lewis went from Kent State to go be Deion's OC at Colorado. We think that you're just trying to pull a fast one on us, which even if that was 100% of the reason, it should have still been enough to give him a waiver. He should have still been able to go and be like, hey, look, my coach just left. I didn't even play at NC Central. Just let me go. Just let me go. But whatever the case, all's well that ends well, I guess. He finally gets to play in the middle of the season. He stayed ready, and UNC is so much better for it. Love to see it. They're a scary team to play, man. I would not want to play UNC right now with the confidence that they're playing with. They're going to be a tough out every week in the ACC, and I might have just guaranteed that they're going to lose this week. But love the UNC story, and not just because I'm very, very biased towards Chiz.
As we talked about at the time, it's good that the NCAA has their priorities correct. The biggest issue in football here is I can't tell you how many times I've tried to fool someone by faking a mental health issue and also that my grandmother is late in life and I love her. Those are two things that people often just make up. So great to see they were really on the right side of history there. This UNC team is just like, that was one of the few teams that I feel like pretty right about as far as they actually could take a step forward, and they played really well this year. And a funny little wrinkle to my story I told earlier about my buddies. My two buddies I was talking about were both Miami fans, so I got to see the Eugene Masterclass play out on their phones because LSU was up by so much, and I was just like, hey, can't bet against Chiz. So, and of course, Walker, I got to watch like pretty good bit, enough of his game to think he had a good game without watching much of his game because he had a day. He just, one thing about Miami is they will make anybody who has got a little bit of juice, they will be the coming out party for any like great player. So yeah, I mean, it's a great day for them. And like UNC football fans have been through a ton, and to start off this year and have this guy be, we kind of knew in the preseason when you brought it up and kind of started out, he probably was slated to be their best receiver coming into the year. And we saw that.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that there are a lot of people looking at that ACC championship going, hey, maybe UNC is the team that could surprise a Florida State in that spot. And they're looking like a more and more complete team, obviously with Walker being able to play, and Drake May playing a lot better lately too. It's kind of weird to think about. South Carolina actually looks pretty good against Drake May in that opener, and the guys that South Carolina has since made look good, Graham Mertz and Will Rogers throwing for over 400 yards in their building. I guess South Carolina should feel really good about not getting totally dominated by Drake May and actually forcing him into some turnovers, albeit.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Like their defense, that was like the best. Well, yeah, the first half against Georgia, and then like that game, it's like their defense just ran out of gas like at halftime in Sanford Stadium.
Definitely feels like that. If you have not, leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every episode of the Saturday Down South podcast, which is presented by Texas Pete. Follow us on the app formerly known as Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.